today we are going to be talking about how to use water-activated paints. We're going to talk about two different kinds of water-activated paints. The first one is called Tempra cakes. They come in a sort of tray like this, and they're usually fairly large and round. And they come with a lot of paint in them. These are going to be the ones that we mainly use. But there is also a certain kind called watercolor paints. They usually come in a long tray like this that opens, and they are smaller, usually oval shaped, and there's much less paint in them. These we save for special occasions. These are what we're going to be using most of the time. Today we're going to talk about how to use both kinds, and I'm going to demonstrate on this tiger that I drew for us. So, every time we paint, you want to make sure that you have a messy mat underneath. This protects our table, and it makes cleaning up super fast and easy, so we have more time to actually paint. You will also need a cup or a bowl of water, a nice paintbrush that is fairly small, and either a paper towel or a sponge to dry your brush off on. We're going to talk about how to use watercolor first. Watercolor paints come in a tray like this. They're usually oval shaped and go all the way down. When you use watercolor paints, you're going to take your paintbrush, swish it in the water, and dry it off by just patting it on your paper towel. So, say I want to start with blue. So if I put just a tiny bit of water into my blue paint, and I start painting maybe these stripes, you can see that this paint is super bright. See how bright blue that is? And I'm taking very careful steps to make sure that I'm staying in the lines of the tiger that I drew. You can see where it got out of the lines a little bit, but that's okay. Now watch what happens if I use the same exact color blue, but this time I don't dry off my sponge, or my brush. I'm taking the exact color blue, and I'm doing more water in. See how I'm being very careful to not drip on my art? I don't want my art to get blurry. And I paint directly on the other side. More water will make it so you have a lighter color blue. It's the exact same color blue, but with more water, you get a lighter color. And with less water, you're going to get a really bright color. With watercolors, you can also mix your color, but we cannot mix them in the trays. That will mess up our paint. So if you want to mix your color, you take your brush, dry it off on your paper towel or your sponge, and let's say I wanted to take a little bit of the yellow, and I'm going to put it on the clear side of my palette. And that might not look like a whole lot, but since these watercolors are so small, just a little bit of paint is going to get us a lot of color. So I rinse my brush off super well. I dry it on my sponge or my paper towel, and then let's take a little bit of blue. Now I can mix that straight onto this and see how I'm starting to get a new color. When we mix yellow with blue, it'll usually get us a greenish or a teal color. And now I can take this greenish or my teal color, and maybe I want to make these stripes on my tiger's body this color. See how I was able to make a whole new color without mixing them in the trays? When we mix them in the trays, that makes it so other people that use our paints after us are not able to get the same bright colors we are. So we want to make sure that if we're mixing colors, we're doing it to the side of the actual watercolor pans. That's what these are called. These are called our watercolor pans. You might notice that I'm painting my tiger in kind of an odd way. I'm doing this because my art is my own, and if I want my tiger to have some blue and teal stripes, I can absolutely do that. Because this is my tiger. He lives in my little art world, and he can look however I say he's going to look like. So let's finish up our tiger stripes up here, just for the fun of it. So, we've talked about how to use our watercolor palettes, and now we're going to move on to our tempera cakes. Our tempera cakes come in a large tray, just like this. They either come with 6 or 9 colors. Let's situate it right here, because you want your paints kind of close so you're not reaching over. So, again, we'll rinse our brush off really well, pat it dry. And let's start with our orange color. So remember, I added just a tiny bit of water to this orange color. I'm going to add a little bit more. Remember, when you add a tiny bit of orange color or water to your orange color, just like our watercolors, you're going to get a really bright color. So now let's paint our tiger's body. And wow, see how bright that is? That is extra bright for our tiger. And I can just grab a little bit more and keep painting and making sure that I'm staying in the correct lines of where the orange is supposed to go. And if your paint starts looking like it's a little dry, that just means you need a little bit more water. So we'll take some water and add it to our paints. Alright, and now I have my body done. The main difference between our tempera cakes and our watercolor is that this has a much thicker consistency. That means the paint is thicker. So that's why it's going to show up a little bit brighter sometimes. So now when I switch my color, I rinse my brush, and maybe I want my tiger to have some green stripes on his tail. And you can see where I messed up a little bit, and that's okay. We don't have to start completely over, because when it dries, we can take some orange paint and go right on top of that again. So, and just like my watercolor, when I add a lot of water, careful not to drip, I'm going to get a lighter shade of green. See that shade of green? You can barely see it. It's so light. And that's exactly what I wanted. So a little water, you get a bright color. A lot of water, you're going to get a really light color. And that's the same for both tempera and watercolor paints. So now I know how to use my tempera cakes, I know how to use my watercolor, and I can go in and finish the rest of my tiger, making sure to always rinse my brush, always dry it off, and keep control of my brush so I stay in the correct areas when I am painting.